We're rolling.
We're rolling.
All right.
Marco,
Put the phone away. I know.
What's the matter, you?
No, what's the matter with
We're
you?
at the table, honey.
ITSP. Do we want this here?
I don't know.
Go. Put it here.
ITS Peace and Love.
ITS Peace and Love. This is from a very a few years ago in San Francisco RSA conference. We wanted to go with peace and love.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
It was pretty successful.
Yeah.
But we're not in San Francisco. We're
no more
in
peace and
Melbourne.
But
I think there is peace and love
kindness
here too,
is
right?
universal. Kindness is universal.
Very good.
And we could do with a bit more of it in our industry and all industries.
I think you're right there.
But I do get that. When we meet at conferences and we run into people we know, there's always like hugs and, sharing. What
That's
have
the
you
beauty
been?
of
What have you been
in-person.
doing? It's not just hard sell all the time,
Yeah.
which is a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
So for those listening, they can't see EJ Wise sitting
No.
with us.
And how
so
tall I am.
They hear her
Very
voice.
Tall.
But I'm very thrilled to have you here, EJ.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. It's a
We're-
pleasure to be here.
We're at CyberCon, hosted by ISA, and it's been a great week here in Melbourne. Lots of great conversations. We've talked a little bit about law. We've talked about privacy. We've talked about security, operations, society,
fishing,
culture,
kids
fishing,
online.
lots of fun
all that
stuff.
stuff.
Policy's been a big part of the topic of discussion. A lot of stuff recently here
Yes.
in Australia taking place as well. But a few words, EJ, about some of the work that you do, maybe some of your background as well, to kind of set the stage for folks listening and
Yeah,
watching.
thank you. So I guess to set the background, I was living in the States until 2016. I was on orders to the Pentagon. I was working with the United States Air Force JAG Corps, who
Super
incidentally made me go to their boot camp. So I had to do the JAG school with all the brand new JAGs, even though I'd been a JAG for some time. I was the oldest playing dodgeball.
That's probably an episode I'll want to.
We can do that one online. Let me just say, my height is not conducive to winning a good dodgeball, but I'm very competitive, so that was unpleasant. But beautiful people and a wonderful tour at the Pentagon, where I was fortunate to be able to work on the law of the war manual, the cyber chapter. And then when I retired, I decided to start a little boutique law firm in 2018 in really what kind of was the Wild West. Australia, coming back here after 8 years in the States in 2016, it was like stepping back 1.5 decades for cyber. It really, we weren't there. We still had this, this Legacy Privacy Act, which is dated 1988. There are changes afoot, obviously. We didn't have, for an external point of view, when you were talking to the Europeans or the English or Americans or Canadians, they'd say, well, where's your cyber legislation? They wouldn't find it because we didn't have anything other than a very small amendment to the Criminal Act, which had the word cyber in it. So they go, well, Australia has no, with our looking at comparative laws, Australia has no cyber laws. And we didn't until 3 days ago. So it's felt like a very early phase over the last little while that I've had the firm, where it wasn't recognised as a part of the profession. I couldn't get the Law Society to give me specialist accreditation as a cyber lawyer, and yet now, after many breaches, we've moved on, and there are a lot of lawyers identifying as cyber law. So that's interesting.
I was going to say, even if there was no national law, I would venture a guess there was a lot of activity from a legal perspective still.
Absolutely, yeah. And so what do you do? Water will always find its course. And so people would use consumer legislation, or the government would try and charge directors under the Corporations Act. So there's always a way to do it, but it's possibly not always the best way to do it.
I mean, even in the United States, before developing certain law, you were referring to the media law back from the early 80s, if I'm not wrong.
Right.
And Europe was doing the same thing. So, I mean, technology has been moving really, really fast, and it moves faster than society. That's for sure.
Absolutely, and we're so intertwined with it. I was just giving a talk earlier on a panel, and we were discussing how, for example, I'm not expected to be any kind of mechanical engineer to buy a vehicle.
Right.
I'm not expected to be a civil engineer to drive over a bridge. But you send me into a shop to buy, let's say, a robot vacuum. And if I don't know technology, and if I don't know how it works, and I don't know how data is stored and collected, I think I might only be just looking at how much dust it's collecting, but actually I need to know what data it's collecting and how it's storing it and where it's going. And so I feel that certainly in Australia we need to right that imbalance, because it's way too much on consumers who should not have to be technology specialists just to purchase everyday items.
It's interesting because we were a few times during our conversations over the past few days, we talked about, and I think you like this one, Marco, in order to drive a car, you don't just get your license one day and start driving. You work, you have experiences in life, being on the road with your parents and what have you, taking a test, you get a license, and you continue to learn and become a better driver, hopefully. Still break laws, probably, some folks.
I feel like in the States, if you don't speed by 10 miles, you are going to get someone rear-ending you.
Exactly. But there's an entity, a vehicle that we're trained on, and a set of infrastructure that's fairly constant that we're trained on. I don't know, there's so many devices in the digital world, phones and vacuums and watches, and I mean, is there a way to connect that? Can we train on the infrastructure and devices generally? And is a license the way to go, or do we put the onus, maybe from a legal perspective, is another topic of conversation we have, should the providers of this stuff really be liable?
So this is a really interesting thing that I feel that both the health sector in America and in Australia have tried to address. The Heart Foundation comes to mind, where you do have to be a little bit of a food scientist about your body when you're going into the supermarket or any store, and you are trying to read the back of the product to understand, what am I consuming? Is this going to be good for my health or not? And we've all seen like the absolute, abundance of new types of people who are maybe more protein heavy or whatever, all these later things. All of us have a little bit of grey hair. We've been around, we remember the old fashioned food triangle that we were raised on. So in that sense, I feel that consumers were at least given a hand. Now the health star rating isn't always that accurate, but you could, if you wanted to, take the time to read the calorie and nutrient information. You could read through the ingredient list if you had really good glasses, and you could see which things were in there. And for example, when I first moved to the States, I had this thing about corn. High fructose corn syrup was the devil. But I was happy with my children having pure white sugar. That's fine. In fact, if I could find soda, as it was called, that had sugar, like the Mexican-based one, I'd be like, oh, this is so exciting. We can give this to the kids. It's fine. So you get your quirks about it, but we have a base level of understanding, and I think that came from elementary school, where we talked about nutrition.
Yeah.
And I know that some elementary schools talk about tech. I remember Obama's Day of Coding. My kids did that. So I think it does start early, that education piece. I think you're absolutely spot on. I think it's really important how we do it, because the most likely place it can be afforded isn't actually the government. It's going to be industry coming in and teaching. And so I don't know whether you had the same scheme in the States, but in Australia we used to have that one of the local banks would be allowed to form a kind of partnership in a school, and it would come and teach about financial literacy. But it also got a kickback because those children would open an account with that particular brand of bank. And I think that's now been stopped. But there was a real plus side to it, which was that it was free financial education and literacy for these students that learned, if I put in 20 cents a week, this bank will give me whatever it was, 5% interest. And it was compound interest. It was really good. So I feel there's maybe a branding opportunity, maybe it could be co-done with government, but I do feel we need to get in early because our future is certainly intertwined with tech. As we enter our declining years, which we need to realise we're doing, right? We enter different forms of disability with ageing. We, us three, let alone the audience, hi audience, we're going to become reliant on tech in different ways we haven't yet imagined. So for goodness sakes, for the future programmers who are still being born, let's get them educated early to be comfortable with it, familiar with it, and even know about basic device hygiene. If you don't want it hearing what you do in bed, maybe don't have a device in your bedroom.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of ethics and ethical conversation that we can have around this topic, but I think when you look at, I think it's Jean-Jacques Rousseau when he said that you have to force people to be free sometimes, oftentimes, and that's why regulation needs to come in at a certain point. To go back to your car example, if I buy a car, I'm sure that it's been tested, it's been vetted, like the brakes, the ABS system, and all of that. So I don't need to be a mechanic, right?
Not always, and there are recalls, and they're liable if
something happens. Something happened, but they are liable, and they, and you gotta trust something in some way, and so you do need the regulation. So the legal and cyber, to me, like, are you focusing on the consumer side? Because so far we've been talking
We have been talking about consumer side. I tend to represent industry. I'll run the self-insured who don't have cyber insurance and suddenly need an attorney or a lawyer because they've been popped. I'll go in. I like to be the first responder before any cyber team's gone in if we're going to try and preserve privilege. And I think my joy, maybe 21 years in the Air Force of doing exercises, which is what we called fake war. So you're always training, exercising for the real thing. So I think my favourite joy is to go in with an already fairly mature organisation that realises it wants to run an incident response simulation, and we pretend that a nasty incident has happened and is evolving. That's probably my favourite thing. But I'll also do governance and dull stuff. I wanted to dig back down on your point, if you don't mind, before I forget it, which is that are you both old enough to remember when subliminal advertising was illegal?
I saw a subliminal advertiser once, but only for a few seconds.
Oh, that's good. Okay, we're on.
I remember that.
Okay, and
I come from advertising.
Oh, you do? Okay, so am I wrong that those laws are no longer adhered to because everyone has a device 2 inches from their nose that is doing this all day, every day? It's not just nudging; it's training. Am I wrong? I couldn't say yes or not, but I mean, I'm sure they use it.
How often do laws get removed? Are you asking the laws exist, or
no? I'm asking about the process of information operations and information warfare. I'm very familiar with this. Other people call it advertising, and I'm saying I watch my child's device in his hands or her hands, and the rate at which they scroll and the amount of information that's bombarding their eyeballs.
There is probably a strong connection to what the subliminal advertiser could do. Like, you realize probably that subliminal advertising was that you see something that you don't realize that you see at a conscious level, but subconsciously you would see the message.
This is it. So those things on the side of, remember our old email, before we had all this mobile phone stuff, but you remember the old email and there'd just be ads along the side, and you're not actively
and you don't
looking,
see it, but peripherally you would see
into your brain. But we're now, it's front and center. For example, if you left a maternity ward with your baby and a tray of cocaine, the government would say, oh, you know what, with that cocaine, you just take it, it's kind of addictive. It's kind of addictive. Just be, the government would care. They'd give me health warnings. Heck, have you seen, I don't know if you smoke, but have you seen the price of cigarettes in Australia? It's like $70 for a packet here, okay? So the government wants to look after you generally. Where are you?
Right.
Where are you? And I don't agree that the social media ban for 16-year-olds is the answer. I'm saying at the point of sale, the person that benefits is the one that I believe owes the duty. So I do sound like I'm all about consumer
No, I
rights.
see where you're going.
So if I'm purchasing a phone, give me the freaking health warning before I purchase that for my child.
Yep. No, I agree.
I want
the warning though.
I want the health rating.
The software organizations already have the EULAs, right?
Which we don't read.
Presumably.
Of course we don't read. Who has
Not
the
even
time?
a lawyer read that.
Who has the time? I know one lawyer that reads it, Annie. But yeah, I think we have to. I know it's a capitalist trickle-down economy.
People
but
still
so
smoke,
then,
people still drink, people still speed.
yes, but we give them some knowledge. We
Yeah.
give it,
I'm
you
not
know,
disagreeing.
there's no picture
Well,
of someone with tooth decay on the side of my Apple phone, but there is if I purchase the cigarettes. So I would like that kind of.
No, I agree. I love this kind of conversation. I mean, I do a podcast that is all about technology and society. So this is, and I also am a Generation X, so I got excited the first time I saw a Walkman, right? Or I used to play with Wi-Fi system, and they did come with a manual, and I was in
Absolutely.
charge. My dad would be like, I don't understand this stuff. You figure it out.
Yes.
Right, so I was the IT guy in the house at that time. but you will look at the manual, you will figure out things, you understand the basic thing, that how it works, how to break it apart to a certain
That's the
level
key,
or not.
understanding.
Now you get a phone that you can't even break apart. You have no idea what it does, right? Many people don't even think it has a GPS or whatever it does. The Roomba vacuum, it's scanning your entire house and listening up. So there is so unknown.
Yes.
That and I think that a basic education, it needs to be done.
I 100% agree. So in maths, as my children went through from elementary to middle school to high school, whatever, the calculators got more sophisticated, and the school taught them along the way.
Right.
So
Yes.
I don't see why just the fact that you've produced children makes you the expert in teaching them technology. Like, sure, I can put some guardrails around it. I can say, it doesn't go into your bedroom after 10, or I can be a parent.
It just got too complicated.
It's so hard. It's okay for me if I'm in the tech industry, but I do not expect the mainstream person to A, know it for themselves, or B, know it for their children. But I think maybe too often about the future I'll have as a slightly disabled or fully disabled person. We all reach this with aging. How are we preparing the future people who are creating around us and for us in this society?
I want to make
What
this,
are we willing to trade off?
I want to make this point. I don't know if it makes sense or not.
Probably
Often
not.
Often I don't. But we talked about the bridge, right? You don't have to be a civil engineer to drive over a bridge. And so there are standards and government practices to ensure that that's safe.
Yes.
Where was I going with this? That's for the greater of society.
Yes.
Right? Lots of people cross that bridge, and if there's a problem with the bridge caused by a person, then I don't know. I guess the point is it's a societal benefit that the government has
Regulation.
oversight there.
Yeah.
For the phone, I think we typically look at it as a one-on-one. Our misuse generally doesn't break the bridge down
I see.
and cause pain for a lot of people. Now, this is my connection that may hopefully make sense of what I'm trying to say here. I have a huge problem going into somebody's house with an Amazon thing where I'm being recorded.
Right.
Or I'm out on the street and there's some glasses listening and recording
Yes.
my conversation, or the broader conversation of everybody in this hallway. And it now impacts a larger group of people. So I personally believe that we've reached a point where this affects many, not just an individual. And it's not just about us choosing whether or not we're eating an orange versus a donut.
Right.
Right? It's society is impacting society. And I think because of that, something needs to happen at the device and network and whatever.
Yeah, well, if I tried to impose myself into your personal life as much as me just wearing those glasses sitting next to you would do, it would be an outrage. It would be a form of assault. But because I've bought the glasses, it's somehow acceptable.
Right.
Yeah. So there was a recent piece of case law in Australia where Bunnings, which is our Home Depot, had been collecting facial recognition data and using it in an AI without consent. There'd been no, notice to the consumers, to the customers going into the store.
There was a recent thing on this.
They're very recent. Yeah. So they got smacked on the wrist by it. So in that way, I mean, I don't like the idea of a big brother, but I like a government that is caring for its citizens, where it's beyond our capability to know. You're innocently going through that store and between these dates, and your image is scooped up. And they actually had, if you like, Bunnings had a kind of good public policy reason behind it, which was to make their staff safe because there'd been some violent customers and they were the known people. But just because you have an altruistic purpose doesn't mean you get to take shortcuts with people's liberties.
So here's a similar case in Madison Square Garden, New York.
Really?
Everybody entering, and they were actually, for the same reason, right? They wanted to keep baddies out, but they were keeping their own definition of baddies.
Yeah.
So they were screening people they didn't, competitors, people that basically that would impact their business.
Wow.
Not just impact the safety of the people inside.
Scope. So there was some kind of scope creep.
Yeah, and I don't think anything was.
So I'm going to give 3 quick things.
All right.
One, 2018, we were in a car. 2019, Singapore RSA conference. We're talking to the cab driver, and he was telling us that if an accident happened and there's nobody gets hurt, people just get out of the car and they exchange what they have to exchange, because there is a camera that probably saw what happened.
Yes.
And then they can, through that, decide which insurance is going to pay.
Yes.
And we ask, but don't you feel like they're always watching you? It's like Big Brother's like, yeah, but they keep me safe. So I'm okay with that. Number one. Then
social contract.
Social contract, okay. Then there are other situations like the one you said. Years ago, I went I boarded a flight on Lufthansa to go to my family in Italy, and they asked me the first time, do you want to use face recognition when you go on the plane? I said no. But when I get on the plane, we don't need to see your passport, just look in here. So, hey, I didn't authorize you. Now I use Clear, so whatever, they can scan my retina, go for it. And the other one that I just learned not too long ago, you go park near a Tesla.
Yes.
And Tesla is going to film you
it's passively
as
going.
soon as you get close enough in the perimeter
it's like
of the
this
car.
Amazon Home thing. It's as soon as you're within range.
If you turn it
filming.
on in the car and somebody scratch it, or if you park near it, you'll be on it.
Yes.
So is it too late? I don't want to be dystopian, but is it too late? Isn't it the paste out of the tube and I can't put it back?
Out of the tube, the cat's out of the bag. So a couple of views on that. One is that we have the right to look at people. There's that cat can look at a king. So I can use my Mark 1 eyeball when you get out of your car.
Right.
And I think, so the Elon Musk argument, if you like, there about Tesla is that camera is not doing anything that a Mark 1 eyeball is, but we both know, Bunnings case, Madison Square, it is doing more. It's collecting that data and it's storing it somewhere. And I don't know where you're storing it, and I don't know what other purposes you might use it for.
The extended use,
And so maybe if we achieve nothing else with this podcast, people won't park near Teslas. and I think we're ahead. I think we've peace, love, and joy. I think we've.
But we're trading convenience for something else.
But somebody else.
But do we know? But do we know?
Somebody else, in this case, is trading our privacy for their convenience.
Well, this is it. And the person who invites you into their home with Amazon Home, they may not warn you. You may have been there half an hour and then you realise. I don't know if you've had the joy yet of experiencing one of our supermarkets. There's basically 2 Woolworths and Coles, or you can go to Aldi. But if you go through the self-checkout, you'll look up and you'll see your own image there. So,
Yeah, I've
and
seen
I
it
assume
at
that's happening in
Amazon
the
Fresh
States.
in the States.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yes. Right. So that's taken
You
over
just
all
walk
the
out.
Trader Joe's. Is that right? That's
Trader Joe now.
or
they
Whole
don't do-
Food that you don't go
Whole
to the
Foods,
checkout
yes.
anymore. Right.
Whole Foods is Amazon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to go back to, and that's how we can finish, but to go back to the banking, they used to come to your school or to the school
Yeah.
and give you a service in exchange of maybe of selling you something.
Yes.
I think it's not a bad idea,
Absolutely.
as long as it make it clear.
That's right. Or maybe open it up to. I think the way it went down a bit downhill, certainly in this state, was because it was just always one particular bank. And you know, a child will get a fondness for that, the comfort of that brand. But I'm fine if you, whatever tech company, call it Apple if you like, who do give great
I'm
student
thinking.
discounts
Yeah, I'm
already.
thinking Apple.
If
yeah.
Apple wants to come in at elementary school and teach my child just how to put on filters, how to exclude people they don't know in some of the platforms, how to only use, for example, applications that are through the Apple platform,
How
be
to
my
use a
guest.
VPN, how to turn off location.
Yeah,
or
the
whatever.
basic stuff.
The
parents
basic stuff.
will not know, and teacher in school probably wouldn't know.
They won't know. And,
unless
and
you do
then-
civic lessons that now become 2 hours a week of technology lesson.
I would love to have a brain scientist on your podcast. Can you note this, please? I want a brain scientist and a cyber psychologist. I want them in the chair with you two. I want to hear about how we are addicts, that tray of cocaine I mentioned earlier, that we're throwing this into the arms of 1-year-olds. And you've seen it. You've been in public transit somewhere. There's a tram in San Francisco where you're with all these other zombies.
Right.
We're guilty of it ourselves. It's very addictive. How are we helping each other with this?
Yep.
Let them learn from an early age.
Well, this was a conversation went in a lot of places. I think it'll make
Super
people
fun.
think. I think it was
Absolutely.
really cool. And as I always say, we don't have answers most of the time, but if we make think and the listener have more questions now than when we started, we did a good job.
I'm happy if they stayed awake and didn't
Yeah.
pull off the road.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Well, we're all
So-
making decisions every moment of every day, and hopefully this will trigger something as you make the next
Yeah,
one. That's
make
all.
you think. Well, stay tuned. There'll be more coming up for this last day here
Absolutely.
at Australia Cyber Conference. And thank you so much
Thank
for
you so much
stopping
for
by.
your
So glad we
time.
got to chat. with you.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yep, very good.
Nothing
And,
like in real life.
Exactly. But you're going to come back on anyway. I already have
Oh.
some other ideas. So.
Oh yes,
Yay.
yes please. Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Take care, everybody.
Bye.